The third point of emphasis that I want a presidential candidate to have is the Middle East and the war on terror. Now, this point is going to be something that a lot of you who are conservatives out there might disagree with me on. Particularly those of you who are younger conservatives, particularly those of you who have more of a libertarian bent, and I'm not criticizing you, because there's a lot of libertarian things that are coming into conservative philosophy now that frankly are a long time in coming. A lot of the libertarian ideals about, you know, our domestic policy and how we handle ourselves financially and what we should expect the government to do and not to do, a lot of the libertarian ideals in those regards are spot on. I'm with you 100%. But where a lot of the libertarians and the newer conservatives lose me a little bit is in their stance on foreign affairs. So I recognize that right out of the gate. Some of you who have agreed with the first 2 points I've said are not going to agree with this one, but I think it's critical. First of all, let me address the idea of the concept of the war on terror. I hate that name for this conflict. I think it is absurd. I think calling this conflict the war on terror is akin to calling World War II the war against kamikaze pilots. It simply does not do justice to the type of conflict it is. It does not describe what we're fighting, and it minimizes really what we're doing. So, you know, that is a problem I've got to begin with. I think it's a very short-sighted way of dealing with this issue. This is not about Al-Qaeda. This is not about the Taliban. They are symptoms of a bigger disease. What this conflict is about, in essence, is culture versus culture. This is Western civilization versus Middle Eastern civilization. This is Middle Eastern culture trying to, you know, take over the world essentially to establish a caliphate. And I know some of you think that sounds like conspiracy theory stuff, but the information is out there. You can certainly go find it and see exactly what we're talking about. They want to take over the world. We are not in a position where Western civilization and Middle Eastern culture can live peaceably side by side. That just cannot happen at this point. You know, there was a time frame where you could have, because we had oceans separating us, and whatever those nut jobs did in the Middle East, well, we didn't really like it, but as long as they didn't attack us here, what are you going to do? Well, they attacked us here. And as quick as a person can get around the world now, and through the internet, and through all the different things that you have, where borders really aren't as strong as they were anywhere in the world before, you find yourself in a position where you have to deal with these threats whether you want to or not. Having an isolationist viewpoint on the Middle East simply isn't going to work. And it comes down to this. They want us dead, and we have to want them dead. Only one of these two cultures can survive, and I feel it must be us. We cannot back down to these people. We cannot capitulate. We cannot negotiate with them. They do not want peace. They want us dead. And I want a presidential candidate in 2012 who understands this, recognizes it, and will tackle this as the problem that it is. That will not shirk the responsibility and say, oh, well, this is just about Al-Qaeda, this is just about the Taliban. No, it's much more than that. Barack Obama has failed in that regard. And to an extent, George W. Bush failed in that regard too. So I want someone who is going to aggressively pursue these people and really win this war. This is effectively World War III. Everybody's scared to death to say that, but that's what it is. Living in peace with these people is not possible. If we want peace, we must eliminate them. The fourth area of focus is economics. I want a presidential candidate who will completely reject the idea of Keynesian economics. I want them to reject the idea of government-driven growth. Instead of believing that the government can provide jobs, which they can, and don't get me wrong, I always get a little bit upset or a little bit squeamish when I hear Republicans saying, we need to go up to Washington to create jobs. No, you don't. It's not the government's role to create jobs directly. Indirectly, there's some things you can do, but directly, that's not your place. Instead, what the government needs to do is to unleash the private sector upon this economy. Less government regulation and streamlining the tax code so that we can encourage success, so that we stop punishing success in this world, but instead encourage it. That's the way that we're going to grow this economy, to get the government out of the way. You know, I've always said, I've always liked to take an old John F. Kennedy phrase and kind of upgrade it for modern times. Something I'm fond of saying is, ask not what your country can do for you, ask not what you can do for your country. Instead, ask what you could do for yourself and your family if your country and its government would just get the hell out of the way. That's the attitude I want a presidential candidate in 2012 to undertake. And then in a more general sense, going beyond just government regulation and streamlining the tax code and that sort of thing, in general, I want them to move the culture, attempt to move the culture towards the idea of embracing wealth and success rather than vilifying it. You know, one of the biggest dangers we have in our nation right now is the fact that we teach our children in our schools, in our entertainment, even some of the parents do this, we teach our children that someone who attains wealth is bad, that they are stealing from other people, or that they are, that they are being unfair to others. That is simply not the case. We need to encourage our children to pursue wealth. We need to encourage our children to work hard and to go out there and compete. And that's what I expect a presidential candidate in 2012 to advocate as well. And also, there's a lot of talk about free trade and fair trade and the definitions for each. You know what? I don't want free trade. I don't want fair trade. I want advantageous trade. I want a candidate who is not going to look for a level playing field. I want a candidate who's going to look and create a playing field that is advantageous for America. The last thing I want is a level playing field. The last thing I want is fairness for other countries. We don't owe them anything. We don't owe them a fair shot at a good economy. We don't owe them any kind of a shot at a living wage for the people. The only people we owe anything to is the American people. And in terms of business and commerce, that's what I want a presidential candidate in 2012 to understand. And the final focus point for a 2012 presidential candidate that I have is a focus on American culture. You know, President Obama has gone across the world and really tried to make America fit in with the rest of the world, and I don't think that's a good thing. Instead, I want a president whose only cultural focus is on America, our culture and our nation. I don't want a president who's going to go around apologizing for our culture, apologizing for our history, or apologizing for our actions. In reality, America has nothing to apologize for. Have we done things in the past that we might not be proud of? Sure, every country has. But those are in the past. Those are history. You can't move forward if you continually try to rewrite and whitewash your history and make up for it. BS. We need to return to the concept of American exceptionalism. We don't need a president going overseas and making coalitions just for the sake of making coalitions. Let's make coalitions based on nations who share similar interests to ours, who have a similar way of thinking to us. Let's convert them to our side rather than capitulating to theirs. I want a president who believes in America first. Our nation, our heritage, our culture, and our values, and wishes to spread our culture throughout the world. Not multiculturalism, but the American culture. Uniculturalism, if you want to look at it that way. Now, some of you are jumping up and down and calling me a racist. I'm anything but. I think any ethnicity can fit into the American culture. Any ethnicity can adopt our attitudes and adopt our religion and adopt our way of thinking and adopt our ethics. And I think we can do that with the rest of the world. I think we're in a better position when we are upfront about who we are as a culture and when we bring that forth to the world, rather than apologizing for who we are and allowing those who would do us harm to have a seat at the table. In closing, the days of understanding the rest of the world, or understanding those who have a different viewpoint, the days of appeasement of our enemies, the days of experimentation with non-traditional values and approaches, those days are over. Or at least they should be. The 20th century has proven that that approach to life, be it foreign policy, domestic policy, or any of the problems that we have in our nation, the 20th century has proven that that approach was an abject failure. The 20th century has proven that government cannot fix all ills. Instead, it normally exacerbates them. The 20th century has proven that we need to not only put on the brakes, but we need to turn the car around. We need to return to the America of old. And the bottom line is, that is exactly what I want a 2012 presidential candidate to pursue. You know, I think we on the right, and particularly those in the Tea Party, have been very smart in not hitching our wagons to anybody just yet. As I mentioned at the top of the presentation, I think it's better to put out there what we believe and allow the candidates an opportunity to fit into our mold rather than to just sit in the back and at some point down the road fit into what they believe. And in that respect, I think the fact that we have just allowed things to play out and let these candidates come out and start to position themselves has been the smartest thing we could do. The media doesn't want us to do that. The media wants us to attach our wagon to somebody right out of the gate so that they can go about the business of destroying that person. In fact, they tried to do that with Sarah Palin all along with the idea that she is the presumptive candidate. She is not. It's not saying I wouldn't support her. I probably would, but you know, there's a long way to go between now and then, and for crying out loud, she hasn't even said she's going to run. But the media would like to paint her as a candidate so they can destroy her. Or if there were anyone else that we got behind immediately, they would do the same thing to them. They want to protect Obama. But the best thing we can do, not only to weather the media storm, but in order, more importantly, to make sure that we have somebody as the president of this nation who will provide the right answers going forward, the best thing we can do is to allow this process, really like a job interview process as it is right now, let this process take its course. And instead of focusing at this early stage on what any particular candidate believes, let's focus on what we believe. And let's be upfront about what we believe. And let's put out there what we believe. You know, I think it would be great if those who are out there in the media and those in this nation, if they really didn't have any idea who we were going to get behind, but instead they had an absolute idea of what we stand for. Let's not worry about the candidate yet. The candidate will emerge. But let's focus on what we believe and why we believe it, and continue putting that message out there. The candidate will come. Well, that's it for today. That's it for this first lecture, if you will, this first presentation of the series. We'll be back next week, and who knows, maybe even between now and then with an update of what we're doing. But I thank you for taking the time and hopefully starting a great discussion in this nation of our future and what it entails. Until next time, this is America's Evil Genius signing off. We'll see you next week.